So it's the summer of 1955. There's this kid, his name is Emmett Till. He's from Chicago. He's 14. He's black. He's African American. His family, his mom, was born in Mississippi, but they moved north, I guess in the early 1930s, to get away from the South, really, sort of the bigoted South. But she still had family in Mississippi, so she decided to send her son down for a couple of weeks that summer in '55. He was going to stay with his aunt and uncle and his cousins. They were really poor people. They worked picking cotton. He was there for about, I think, just a few days, Emmett. And he goes into a grocery store with his cousins. And they're doing their thing, and he kind of goes into the grocery store and just sort of walks around a little bit. And the woman, who was the owner, she's working the cash register. She was young. She was in her early 20s. And he says to her, he looks up at her, and he says that, he said, "You look like a movie star." And then he whistles at her. She was white. This was 1955, the Deep South. You know, a black guy flirting with a white girl was sort of like unimaginable. So she's enraged by this. She runs out of the store, runs over to her truck. She's got a gun. And the rest of his cousins see what's going on, and they just panic, and they just all take off. They get in their car, and they pretty much escape. I think 2 nights later, Emmett's with his cousins and his aunt and uncles, the middle of the night. Truck pulls up, pounds on the door. Guys have guns. And they pull him out of his bed and kidnap him and torture him. And ultimately they killed him for telling this woman that she was pretty. 3 days after that, his body was pulled out of the local river. The cops knew this was a big deal. Corrupt, small town, redneck cops. They just want to make this whole thing disappear, so they were preparing to just bury him. Well, his mother in Chicago is not having it. She says, "No way." She says, "You're bringing him back. He's going to be buried out of his home or Chicago." Up to that point, it was just, it was a very local story. Nobody other than this little nothing town knew about it. But then it became national. It kind of exploded when the funeral happened. And it was because of something that Emmett's mother did or insisted on. At the funeral, she said, "I want the coffin open. I don't want a closed casket." He'd been tortured and been in a river for 3 days. He looked terrible. Didn't look like him at all. Looked almost monstrous. Thousands of people went to this funeral. Pictures of him in the casket were leaked to the press. And it horrified the country. She said, her famous quote, his mom was, let the people see what they did to my boy." Anyway, shortly after, the husband of the woman in the store, he's arrested along with his brother because they were the ones who killed him. I won't tell you the rest of the story. You can go watch it. It's a movie that's out right now. I saw it the other night. It's called Till, T-I-L-L, which was his last name, his mother's last name. The story is really told through the eyes of the mother. It's pretty good. It's very good. It's really worth seeing. Shocking. You're like, how could this have been only 65 or 70 years ago? Like, how could this possibly have been our country? So I won't tell you certainly about the ending, but there's one scene I do want to mention. It was pretty powerful. It was in the courtroom. Emmett's uncle, the kid's uncle, testifies because he was a witness. He was the one who opened the door when these guys were pounding on it, trying to get to the kid. So he knows who they are. And the big question was, will he testify? Because for a black guy back there, to testify against a white person, the black guy was pretty much signing his death warrant. He'd be as dead as his nephew if he tried to fight for justice, if he testified. So nobody thought he would. But he did. It's a great scene in the movie where he's on the stand and he's asked, are the people who did this here? And he says, yes. And he stands up. He wasn't even asked to stand up. He stands up and he points at them. It's a famous picture. Photography wasn't allowed in the courtroom. It was, prohibited. But some photographer snuck his camera in and famously took this shot. So it's this guy standing up and pointing, and he's pointing at the guys that killed his nephew. So he testified. He was so courageous. He was so heroic. He was so scared. He got his wife and kids out of Mississippi even before the trial. And as soon as the trial was over, he was gone because he knew he'd be gone. He knew they'd kill him if he testified. So he did, and then he got out of town. This whole idea of testifying, testimony, speaking the truth, especially when you know it's not going to be received well, it won't be appreciated, it might even be dangerous if you express it, but you know it's true, you know it's right. It's exactly what he speaks of, Jesus, in this gospel. He's talking about a lot of dark stuff. It's not a very cheery gospel. He's talking about earthquakes and plagues and famine and all this terrible stuff. And he says the good guys are going to get called into before the authorities, kind of like this uncle was. But Jesus says, but don't sweat it, because I'll be with you. I'll speak through you. I will be there. But you got to be willing to testify. You got to be willing to speak the truth, especially when it's hard. So there's just a question for tonight I'd like to kind of throw out your way. Speaking the truth. Can you think of a time when you didn't, in all honesty? You didn't testify. We turned our back on this gospel. I should have said something, but I was scared, so I kept my mouth shut. And somebody maybe got hurt because of it, or was betrayed because of it, or was more alone because I wouldn't speak up and speak out. That doesn't fly. It's not okay, says Jesus. Like, if we take this faith of ours, seriously, being quiet isn't okay. I mean, there's just places that we don't want to go, right? Places that I think we even sometimes run from. Because if I express truth, God's truth, the truth, people who are not living the truth, they're not going to be okay with it. And I may well pay a price. I mean, as dramatic as that story and that movie, I hope not, although it's a true story. I'm just talking about everyday stuff. Not literal courtroom moments, but moments. When I was in college, I went to I spent 2 years at Nassau Community, and then I transferred up to Cornell, upstate. And I remember when I got there, I was scared because I was a transfer student. I didn't know anybody, figured everybody else would know people already. But I lucked out. I got assigned to this, the dorm I was in was for transfer students. So we were all in the same boat. We were all kind of scared. Nobody really knew anybody. We were all kind of looking for friends. So it was good. And it was particularly good because the night I arrived, I met a bunch of kids that I really liked right away. I just lucked out. And I was loving life. There was about 6 of us. And this was about a week or so before classes even began. It was all orientation stuff, maybe 5 days of orientation. So we didn't have to go to school, go to parties, all these kind of cool field trips. Got these new friends. I wasn't thinking about home. I wasn't homesick. On the 4th day, that day, everybody in my group, we all had stuff to do. So the plan was we were going to meet up for dinner that night. There was a diner in town. We were going to get something to eat there, and there was a fraternity party on campus. We were going to go there. So I show up, and I'm waiting around, and 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, nobody's there. Probably after, maybe a half hour, I left. I was like, what the heck, where is everybody? So I walked back to my dorm, and I was kind of not feeling good. I was thinking, man, did they all kind of blow me off? How did they all not show up? This was long before cell phones. You couldn't call anybody or text anybody to find out, where are you? So I went back to my dorm, a little not happy, and I said, all right, let me hang for a bit, and I'll go to the frat house. I'll go to the party. So I went. That was worse. They were even more absent, they weren't there at all. I'm standing at this party, I felt like the biggest loser. I felt like I had no friends. I probably stayed for 15 minutes, and I got out of there. So I was not a happy kid at that point. For the first time, I started feeling homesick. Anyway, I go back to my dorm, and phone rings, and it's my parents. And I remember them being kind of annoyed at me because I hadn't called them. I think the night I arrived, I called them saying I got there, and then the next couple of days I didn't. Because I was loving being there. So they called, and I'm kind of telling them, how things are going. I don't mention this thing at all. And my mom gets off the phone. My father stays on for a little bit. And he goes, everything okay? And I said, yeah. He says, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, Dad, I'm fine. And he said, Brian, you don't sound so good. You don't sound fine. God, he was very perceptive. And I said, I told him what I just told you, about being ditched by these kids, people who I thought were my friends. And I don't know, he said something to the effect of, hey, who knows what happened? He didn't know. And I remember him saying, hey, worst case is, that's the worst case, that they all kind of blew you off. And you know what? I mean, that stinks, but then they weren't worth it to begin with. They really weren't friends, and you'll find new ones. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. I'm thinking, I just don't really want to hear that. This was right before Labor Day. School hadn't even begun yet. Oh no, I guess it was beginning maybe a day or two, and then it was Labor Day weekend. And we were off that Monday. So I said to my father, I think I may come home for the long weekend. When I left to go to school, that was no way was I doing that. I said goodbye, and I wasn't coming back till, I don't know, maybe October or maybe Thanksgiving. There's no way I was coming back within a week. But I kind of was feeling homesick. So I said to my father, yeah, I think I may come home this weekend. I may catch the bus. And there's a kind of a long pause, and he goes, I'll never forget it. He goes, no, Brian, I don't think so. I was like, I wasn't asking for permission. I was like, what the heck? And he goes, no, I think you got to stay. And he said, listen, if you come home this weekend, you're not going to want to go back Monday night. So you got to stay, and it's going to be okay. The worst case scenario, you're going to survive that. You're going to be okay. So now I was even more upset. It was a long, rotten night. The next morning, I'm walking over to the dining hall, I guess to get breakfast, and I see two of my 5 ex-friends at this point. And we're walking toward each other, and one of them says, "Hey, what happened?" And I'm like, "What happened? What happened?" And they go like, "Well, where were you?" And I'm like, where were you all?" I went to the wrong diner. And I went to the wrong frat house. It was a very wrong night. You know what? I was never so happy to be wrong, because I realized they didn't ditch me. So it all worked out. But I was thinking about my dad and what he must have felt like when he hung up the phone. He must have been sick. And if he mentioned it to my mom, she would have been more sick. Because everything within him, I'm sure, would have been like, "Man, just come on home. Jump on the bus and come home." But he knew, like, nah, that's not going to be good for him. He can handle this storm. He'll survive this. He'll weather this storm. I think that's what this gospel is. It's this whole testifying thing. It's not, rarely is it about sitting in a courthouse, but it's about talking to your 20-year-old kid and saying no. Sometimes no is yes. It hurts, and we're not the most popular person in the world because of it, but it's the truth. And I think that's what he's speaking to. I mean, just look at the culture we're living in today. This kind of like increasingly woke culture, where everybody just wants to define their own truth. It's like, no, there's truth, and then there's non-truth. Just because you say something is true doesn't make it is. But a month ago, there was a girls' volleyball game, high school volleyball game in North Carolina. High school seniors, juniors and seniors, I guess. They were playing against this team, and on the other team, there was a guy playing, a boy, who was now saying that he thought he was a woman. So he was allowed to play against the girls. He spiked the ball so hard off this girl's face, she got a concussion. She was sent to the hospital. She saw double for a couple of days because a guy was playing against a girl. We know that's crazy. We know that's unfair. We also know that that poor boy, something's not right with him. Man, maybe more than anybody, he needs our prayers. But you know what he doesn't need? For all of us to say, yeah, he's a girl. Because he's not. Like, he's not. That's not the truth. And it's very hard. I can stand up here in a church and talk tough about this, but get thrown into the midst, and it's tough. But like, we've got to live the truth. We got to speak the truth. You know, we got the school next door. I've been down here for 10 years involved with the school. I was at St. Anthony's High School for 6 years. I've been around schools a lot over the years. I'm around teachers a lot. Get a bunch of teachers together in a room. You know what the biggest complaint they have? I would say, like almost without question, what frustrates them the most, it's not the kids, it's not behavioral issues, it's not technology and the challenges of teaching. All that stuff is real. You know what's making teachers most crazy? Anybody know? Parents. Parents who will just go to bat for their kids no matter what. They'll defend their kids no matter what. They'll cover, they'll protect, they'll lie. They'll go to war against the teacher because something is being said about their kid that they don't want to hear. So they're just going to redefine stuff. And they make life impossible for the teacher. And maybe most importantly, they're not serving their kid because it's just not the truth. Man, talked about my parents before. I'm so grateful for 1,000 reasons. Here's one. Man, when I was a kid and I screwed up, I got caught doing something I shouldn't do. The teacher got involved, the coach got involved. I was presumed guilty. My parents gave the adult the benefit of the doubt because I was guilty, because I was an idiot at times. That's what kids do. Instead of going to war with those people, when you talk to teachers, they are so grateful when they've got to talk to a parent about something, a little difficult. They are so grateful when the parent says, "I'm sorry, and I'll talk to him, and thanks." You can't believe it, because they're just living the truth. They're speaking the truth. They're testifying. Why we got a bunch of kids here who are preparing to make confirmation. We got parents who are coming for classes afterwards, learning more about the faith. Why? What's confirmation about? I think, it's about a lot. But here's one thing. It's we want to be honorable people. We want to live principled lives. We want to be truthful. We want to testify to the truth. Whether you're that uncle sitting in the witness stand, or you're my father when I was in college, or you're a parent, or you're a kid, we want to tell the truth. And it's not easy. And we need God's help. We need the Holy Spirit to help us testify. It's that simple. It's this final line. By your perseverance, you will secure your lives. Man, how great is that? By your perseverance, you'll secure your lives. You know what? Storms in life, they're inevitable. We can't run from them. We can't deny them. We just need to weather them. And we will. It was my father saying, "Hey, Brian, you're going to get through this. Weather the storm. Don't deny it. Don't redefine it. Weather it. By your perseverance, you'll secure your lives." Yes, you will. Yes, we will.